Hi everybody, and welcome to AP Microeconomics with Mr. Farmer. Today we're talking about Chapter 19.2 and consumer behavior. So the theory of consumer behavior and the utility maximization rule. Here we go. So first we're just going to do some practice with marginal utility and total utility. We want to make sure we can do this. Go ahead and pause and make sure you can do this chart, fill it all in with the marginal utility and total utility. And I'm going to go ahead and do it on here. And there we have it. So the one change to 3 sets of marginal utility of 2. 3 with the change marginal utility of 3 plus 4 gets to be my 7 on here. 7 changed to 8 divided by the change of quantity of units would be 7 to 8 is a 1. And then 8 changed to 7 is a negative 1 on there. So if you can do that, good, you're all set. We'll be using this later on in class. So the theory of consumer behavior, again, going back to kind of that demand curve question, is a theory that analyzes how people make choices when buying goods and services. Now, we've talked about this before in Chapter 3 of demand. We're revisiting some of these concepts. So again, as we talked about, the law of diminishing marginal utility helps explain how consumers choose how to spend their money. And we're going to be having some assumptions that we're going to be going through. There's about 4 ideas that the theory of consumer behavior really attaches to. And we're going to go through some of these, through all 4 of these assumptions. So the first one is that the theory assumes consumers are rational. Now what that says is consumers are rational at the time of the purchase. We think that the money is well spent. We think we're going to get this much use out of it. We're rational also to the consumer's extent. Obviously, if I go and buy something, someone might wonder, why would I ever want that kind of a thing? Well, it makes sense to me as a consumer because it's my own utility. Also, there's a buyer's remorse thing. So after the fact, you might regret it and say, maybe it wasn't a good decision. But at the time of the purchase, we're going to act rationally. Meaning they're going to try and use their funds, their money, their budget in such a way to get the most satisfaction from their purchases. And that's kind of the core behind the theory of consumer behavior is people try and get the most for what they have. 2 is preferences. Consumers have preferences. We have different uses, different utility, different oodles for different goods and services, and we apply those. And although we don't walk around a store saying, oh, I get that many oodles out of that thing, we do have that in our mind to think about how much use we would get out of it. Would we like this kind of a thing? Would it be helpful for us? And so people have a general idea as far as how much marginal utility they would receive. Would I wear that shirt? Would I watch that movie? Would I like that food? I have a general idea as far as how I individually would perceive all these goods and services. And so again, we have consumers are rational behaviors. They're going to get the most use out of their funds. They're going to apply their preferences, their likes and dislikes within that rational behavior. And then we get to the third one, which is budget constraints. Again, we talked about how the law of diminishing marginal utility deals with fixed resources, and the budget is a big portion of that. Well, that's true. So consumers consider their budgets. There is limited income. This idea of scarcity with money is constraining. And so consumers keep this in their minds as they go through to make their choices, which brings to the last one, which is prices. If we have a budget, then we also need to be considering our prices. Every good has a price, and that affects how much of the good a person can buy. And so if the price drops, then my budget is not quite as tight, and vice versa. And so as we go through the theory of consumer behavior and eventually the utility maximizing rule, which is what this is building to, we're going to be considering all these things. We're going to make sure our consumers act rationally. They want to get the most bang for their buck. They're going to know how much utility they get out of the goods and services. They're going to question the amount of prices for the goods, and they'll know that they do have a budget that they need to maintain. And so we're going to be applying all 4 of these in order to consider what theory or what consumers do. It's the theory of consumer behavior. So I've talked about in passing the utility maximizing rule, so let's go over what that is. By definition, the utility maximizing rule is the idea that the last dollar spent should always be for the most utility. Now, I think the last dollar spent is a little misleading, and so the overall idea is that every time I make a purchase, so every last dollar I spent it on good 1, I spent it on good 2, I spent it on good 3. Every time I spend $1, it should be for the most utility from the options available to me. Another way of looking at this is the overall thought is that any combination of the goods available should get me a lower total utility because I'm a rational consumer. I have my likes and dislikes. I've considered my prices. I've looked at my budget. And I've thought really carefully about this, which means the combination of goods and services I am choosing right now are for the most total utility. So I got an example on here. 1 week from this very moment, I'll be sitting at a desk listening to Mrs. Olson teach. So, if you'll excuse me, I've still got a little summer left to maximize. Miles to go before I sleep. So, the constraint, the little bit of time, the week left before school starts. What is this person going to do? An apt metaphor? No, that's pretty much literal. What this person wants to do is go ride a bike. Okay, and that's going to get them the most utility they can out of their available resources. They're going to maximize your utility with the choices available with a constraint of, in this case, time. They're using the theory of consumer behavior. They're rational. They're concerned with their preferences. They're looking at their, in this case, budget constraint, which would be their time, and they're making a choice. So in order to determine the optimal amount of items to purchase, we'll use the margin utility per dollar. It's a very literal title to the equation. We're going to take our margin utility, which we've practiced before, and we're going to divide it by the price of the good. Just like when we did comparative advantage, we want to know how much per dollar of utility do I get. When I do this, it's easier for me to compare apples to oranges, whatever else it is. Now I'm figuring out per dollar spent, how much use am I getting out of this good or service? So previously we've practiced determining marginal utility. We'll now simply again divide that marginal utility by the price of the good. In this way we determine how much utility has been gained per dollar spent on the good. And so then we can figure out what combinations of good A and B or whatever you're talking about is the best. And we're going to make sure we get the most use out of our money, the most bang for our buck, because again, we're rational consumers, by looking at this price. So utility maximizing rule. The last dollar spent on either good should be gained the most utility for that choice. Okay, we've said that one. So the way I prefer to say is that each dollar, each time we make a decision, each dollar spent should gain the most utility for its buying power. So of the available things, it might gain the most utility out of this. And so the algebraic restatement of this utility maximizing rule is the margin utility of product A divided by the price of A would equal the margin utility of product B divided by the price of B. So the margin utility per dollar of A should equal margin utility per dollar of B. It doesn't always work out this way, and we'll see that in some practice, but the idea is that if this is the case, that means all of the choices leading to this final statement have made sure that I'm getting the most utility for my price with my budget in consideration. This is the utility maximizing rule. And so unless we're told otherwise, we will assume the two goods have a margin utility per dollar that's equal to each other. And we'll again see that in some practice as well. So in practice, the utility maximizing rule, which is also referred to as the equal marginal principle, which is not a very commonly used one, but College Board does use equal marginal principle, and so I'll make sure we do see this. So we have this kind of example. So a consumer is trying to decide what combinations of goods would maximize their utility. Two goods, movies, and video games. For this example, we'll assume the price of a movie is $5 and the price of a video game is $10. Just nice, easy numbers. And the monthly budget for the two goods is $65, and that is entirely spent on these two goods. So here's a table. So sorry about the formatting. This is the equation for marginal utility. Total utility new minus total utility old divided by quantity new minus quantity old. It's a marginal utility. It just kind of got shifted around with the formatting. So here we have our table. We have our movies, green to green, video games, blue to blue. And so we're going to first find our marginal utilities. Okay, we're given the total utility over here. Okay, so 20 minus 0 divided by 1 minus 0 is 20. So if you're not sure how we got marginal utility, okay, we need to kind of do some checking and make sure. Okay, so then we have 18. 38 minus 20 divided by 2 minus 1 is 18. And we have 15, 53 minus 38, so the change for the total utility divided by the change in the quantity over here. And again, we're going to keep going. So we've got 12, 10, and 8. So again, if you're not sure what those numbers are, please look at this closer, look back at the first start of the video, and we can talk more about that in later time also. Now what we need to do now is we're going to do the marginal utility per dollar, which is per price. In this case, I just wrote in the $5 over here. So we're going to take this $20, this 20 marginal utility, and we're going to divide it by the $5. So what we're going to find is we get a 4 ootles per dollar for this first units. And again, this 20 above right here came from the total utility. That's just where the number comes from. We want to make sure we can see where it comes from. So for the second unit, I got a marginal utility of 18. So I'm going to divide it by the price. And so I'm going to get a 3.6 ootles per dollar. 18 divided by 5. And again, 15 marginal utility divided by my price. My 5 is 3 ootles per dollar. And 12 marginal utility divided by my 5 is 2.4 ootles per dollar. And 2 and 1.6. So you can make sure you can see where these numbers are coming from. And then we're going to do the same thing on the video game side. So we're just going to kind of put those all in right there. So again, double check, you can see where those numbers all came from. And then we're going to do the same thing for the video game. So marginal utility divided by the price, in this case the $10. And there we have those. Okay, so I'm a rational consumer. I'll make sure I have the most bang for my buck. Okay, I know my preferences and likes, and so I've considered my uses. So now I'm going to consider the prices. That's why I did the marginal utility per price per dollar. So now I need to make sure I keep track of my $65 over here in my budget. So there's kind of two methods to working on this. The first one is the check method. Now this is actually the method that I prefer to use because it works no matter what, no matter how crazy it is. For our class, we're only going to have 2 units, or 2 goods, movies and video games. Reality is maybe you have 5 or 10 or 20, in which case it gets more complex, but if you do the check method, it still works out the exact same, so that's kind of nice for this. So this is what I usually do, and so what we're going to do is, for each time I make a choice as a consumer, I'm going to get the most use per dollar. So my first choice is, I can choose to go and buy my first video game and get 5 ootles per dollar, or I can buy my first movie and get 4 ootles per dollar. So which one gets you more? The first video game. Okay, so now I need to make my second decision. Well, my second decision is I can buy my first movie, go there, or I can go ahead and get to my second video game. So think about this as you're putting it into like your Amazon cart. What are you checking first? Well, now I can get 4 ootles per dollar and get my first movie, or I can get my second video game and get 3.5. Well, in that case, the 4 sounds better to me. Okay, and then we're going to keep going. So 3.6 or 3.5, which gets me more use for my dollar as a rational consumer. I want the most for my money, and that's 3.6. Now again, you want to make sure you keep track of your budget. So our budget was $65. So far I've spent, let's see, $5 for videos, or for movies. So 5 plus 5 is 10, plus one video game, for $10, so $20. So yeah, I've kept track of my budget. I still have money to go. Let's keep going. So 3.5 or 3. I'm not buying these first ones. I've already done that. I'm getting less use to measure marginal utility. And so 3.5 or 3. 3.5. And then we keep going. 3 or 2.5, which gets me more use. 3, okay? And then we keep going. 2.4 or 2.5, 2.5. And again, we want to make sure we're checking our budget. We do need to keep track of this. So, we can go $5, so 5, 10, 15, plus 10 over here, so 25, 35, 45. I have a total of 65 to spend, so yes, I can keep going. So 2.4 oodles per dollar, or 2. Okay, 2.4 is better. Okay, and then 2 or 2. Well, yeah, I'll buy those at the same time. So again, we're going to keep track of our budget. So we go 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 35, 45, 55, 65, which was our budget. So what combination of goods and services would maximize my utility? 4 units of video games and 5 units of movies. I check my budget. I have that total amount. If I want, I can do the total utility. And that's a way of double checking and proving, did you get the most utility? The answer is yes. I got 205 total utility. I just added the 75 over here and the 130 over here. So I got 205. So you can't disprove I got the most bang for my buck because I got 205 oodles. There's no other combinations of movies to video games within my budget that get me more use. Now, here's the other way. Remember that utility maximizing rule? The marginal utility per dollar of A would equal marginal utility per dollar of B. Well, yeah, 2 oodles per dollar equal 2 oodles per dollar. 4 and 5 kind of looks familiar, right? Now with that, you definitely do try it, but make sure you double check your budget. It doesn't always work out, but it's definitely something to look at. Your turn. So go ahead and pause this for a moment, and then we'll go through and make sure. So you're going to target wherever you're going for. You have jackets for $10, sweaters for $5. What combinations of these would be the best use for you? Go ahead and pause this. And when you're ready and check your math, go ahead and press play and we'll see what's going on. Okay, so let me go and write this in. So I'm going to go pretty quick. I'm using my mouse, so it's going to be a little clunky here. So we got 40, got 35, 25, and 20. It's a $10 price tag, so margin to per dollar is 4, and 3.5, and 2.5, and 2. Then over here we got 25, 15, 10, and 2, and the price is $5, so it's going to be margin to per dollar of 5, and 3, and 2, and a 0.4. So, first place I'm going to do the check method. So you could try this and say, okay, margin to per dollar of 2 equal to margin to per dollar of 2. So we can check that. So we have a $40 price tag, so that'll be 10, 20, 30, 40, 45, 55, 65. So if we go to margin to per dollar of 2, we've overspent. So we can't just use the utility maximizing rule. This is why I do like to use the check method. So my first stop is going to be a 5 oodles per dollar, so I'm going to put check right there. And then 4 or 3.5, okay, 4, or 3.5 or 3, okay, 3.5. I'm going to check my numbers, so 10, 20, 25, I can keep going. So 3 or 2.5, 3, that's 10, 20, 30, I can do one more time, so 2.5 or 2, I do 2.5. And that's all I'm doing. So my utility maximizing, the best combination is going to be a 3 and a 2. There you have it. That's the utility maximizing rule. So I'm going to give you some practice on the 19.2 worksheet, which is linked in the one-stop shop. Hopefully this all makes sense. Until next time.